Hi, my name is Lily, and today in this video I'd like to talk about the archetype of the woman in red, or also called a Scarlet Woman, as well as infidelity in general in relationships and the more subconscious meanings of that type of dynamic. I talked about this a little bit in my other videos, but I'm more specifically pinpointing just talking about cheating in general in relationships in this video. The woman in red symbolism is commonly expressed and referenced in society through art and literature, and although it's a she, the archetype can be present in men as well, or anyone. Anybody can embody any characteristic of any archetype at any time, and not entirely of all of the noted characteristics of the archetype, but some will apply. The woman in red is typically a temptress who uses sexuality for power. A true woman in red is all about seduction, passion, and the chase. She represents the female sexual impulse and is a liberated woman from societal expectations of how a woman should behave. She often seeks out men that are already taken and to be so enticed by her that he is willing to cheat on his partner. She is often heavily scrutinized in society and looked down upon as a homewrecker. When people continue to embody this archetype, it is a negative pattern trying to get their attention. Their shadow is seeking others' shadow. They have a desire to seek out taken people, and this can appear consciously or unconsciously. Some people intentionally do this, and then some people just keep subconsciously attracting people that happen to be taken. This can indicate intimacy issues where the person doesn't actually want a committed relationship. They don't actually want to build something really authentic and intimate, and so they're going to go after someone who's already taken. And so it's like there's only a limited amount of connection you can have with someone that's already taken, authentically at least. These people will look for others who are subconsciously desiring a fantasy escape from their current relationship. These shadows tend to find each other. The woman in red sticks a fork in the foundation of this already established relationship. She exposes the cracks and the weaknesses. People hate on her for destroying something that seemed so perfectly fine and secure, but if it truly was a strong and secure relationship, then the third person wouldn't have even been able to get through to the other person. They would have been strong in their dedication and commitment to the person that they're in a relationship with. People want to demonize her, but she is mirroring back those darkest parts of ourselves for further reflection and to bring light to them. It is selfish on her part, but it's also putting the authenticity of the relationship to the test. Sometimes situations like this is like a one-time lapse of judgment. The shadow was exposed and there's regret and people can work through it. But sometimes this can speak to an even greater dissonance in the connection or even deeper secrecy of infidelity that's been going on for some time. This type of infidelity can relate to people who have porn addictions or addictions to prostitutes or like OnlyFans, which to some isn't cheating, but to some it is. Every relationship has its own boundaries and expectations on what's okay. Deeper sexual addictions also make a relationship difficult and cause greater intimacy issues. Finding out about a sexual affair can be the exposing of a deeper issue, which will prove too great to resolve together. An archetype or mythological figure that I have read a bit about that I like, her name is Lilith, and she is more commonly known, I'd say, in our society as Adam's first wife in the Bible. However, she has many different facets and versions all throughout recorded history. In the story, she basically did not want to submit to Adam. She wanted to be considered equals, and he refused. So she ran away and was replaced by Eve, who was willing to submit to Adam. Lilith's whole identity is about being taboo and different from what society wants or expects from anybody. A later constructed version of Lilith portrays her as a demon seductress who targets men, and often married men, and causes them to cheat. There is some overlap here with her and the woman of red archetype. One of the books I've read about her says that she often goes after married people, but often it's because the relationship has reached its expiration and it's time to move on, and she's the catalyst for this change. She is the symbol associated with our darkness and the collective shadow. She can represent many dark issues that come up, especially in relationships, such as inequality in relationships, suppressed rage, resentment, sexual manipulation, self-exile, and infidelity. She has an essential role to uproot the hidden darkness in all of us. Not all infidelity is going to be a woman in the red, which is primarily sexually based. Some are emotionally based. This tends to happen when people are in a mutual environment together and they begin developing an emotional connection first, which sometimes leads to more. This is with coworkers or mutual friends or even other family members of the person you're with. Taylor Swift did a Long Pond studio session discussing her folklore album, which was back a few years now. I think that was 2020 or 2021 that she did that. She said she wrote about different perspectives in a love triangle. A young boy in love with a girl, but he had a summer fling with another girl before trying to get the first girl back. She writes a song in the perspective of the girl who was the fling, who would seem like a bad girl, or as society paints the other woman. I'm going to read you a quote of what she said in the video about it. But really, she is a very sensitive person who fell for him, and she was trying to seem cool and seem like she didn't care, because that's what girls have to do. And she was trying to let him think that she didn't care, but really she did, and she thought that they had something very real. And then he goes back to Betty. So the idea that there's some bad villain girl in any type of situation like that like takes your man is really a myth, because that's not usually the case at all. Everyone has feelings and everyone wants to be seen and loved, and that was the case with Augustine, who was the other person in that love triangle. And Taylor speaks of this very personally, as she has been through a situation like this, which I'm sure she has. It is unfortunately something a lot of people can relate to. I think she is very correct in the thought that most love triangle situations are emotionally based instead of just someone who is bad and wants to destroy a connection. But I think that's going to be like the main distinction, is that there's like some types of affairs that are more sexually based versus like emotionally based. The girl in the love triangle is often labeled as delusional or desperate for thinking that it could work out with this guy who's already taken, and that he will choose her, and that this third woman is shamed by society, when the feelings, the connection, and the experiences were very real to her. Sometimes the feelings are so intense, and this often indicates the shadow aspects at work. The uncertainty causes even more instability. Sometimes you can logically recognize that a situation probably won't go in your favor, but that doesn't mean that the feelings go away. A situation like this often involves everybody getting hurt. I think it's easy to hate on a situation like this and to be in a high horse and declare how this could never happen to me. And, you know, maybe that's true. Some people don't end up going through situations like this in their life. But often I think it's easy to think you know what you would do in a situation if anything like that ever came up. And then once you're in it, things are different. It's easy to judge a situation that you've never been in. You know, you don't feel what everyone feels, and you're not that person. So every position in a love triangle is triggering. The shadow of why did they cheat is now awakened. The shadow of should I stay with them has awakened. For the third person in a love triangle, I can say that their position can often be very complicated. You know, they have love for this person that they desire, and, you know, sometimes they feel guilty because it's like, well, my feelings are real. What I'm going through is real, but yes, I am coming in between an already established connection. And, you know, some people, I would say most, you know, I would say, I don't know. I really don't know. I haven't taken a survey, but I'd say there are definitely some guilty feelings involved, unless you're like, you really don't care, you know, narcissistic. Yeah, but this third person is now in this very confusing energy of like, you know, will they choose me? Will they keep keeping me a secret? Even if they do choose me, will life just get more complicated? I've seen enough Dateline to know that a common motive for murder is these love triangles. For this third person, I mean, sometimes they do have reciprocated feelings, but they still choose to stay with the other person, the first connection or their first marriage or whatever, and not entertain this And if that happens, then of course it's like this feeling like, oh my God, was this all for nothing? Like, this was just ridiculous. Such a great calling of love and desire only to be met with emptiness and regret. This shadow aspect of not being chosen, not being seen, and feeling overlooked. This concept of infidelity and not being chosen by someone else runs deep in the lore and mythology of Lilith. In the story in the Bible, or before the Bible, I don't think it's actually in the Bible. I think it's like before. I didn't read the Bible, but in the Bible story, the Christian view of Lilith, Adam tried to control her and she ran away. Then the angels come to her and they tell her, well, God's willing to destroy her. And then she's replaced by Eve, someone who is more digestible and will do what Adam wants. Through her pain, she began to create her own chaos as revenge throughout the world. She is hurt and does not know true love. She is the primal energy that we all have, the lower behaviors of pain. She took out all of her pain on the rest of the world when all she wanted was to be loved. A quote from one of the books I read about her called Embracing Lilith. We must remember that the unenlightened Lilith is the divorced woman. She feels abandoned, less than she is meant to be, and marginalized. Instead of becoming the victim, she lashes out in rage, attempting to find self-esteem and make others pay for her pain. This aspect of humanity is far out of balance at this time when so many individuals feel subjugated. Anyone who feels different from the mainstream or other than desirable to society has known this pain and experienced the shame and rage that comes with being put aside. Oftentimes, all of these shadow aspects come from earlier relationships or childhood traumas and thus are reawakened in situations like this. These experiences are meant to trigger and awaken us to our own self-limiting patterns, and they are painful. Love triangles are unfortunate. They hold a lot of space for self-reflection, discovery, pain, growth, and expansion. These are the darker parts of life that are often pushed and hidden away. I think it's better to talk about these things and bring it to light so we can understand them better. The last perspective that I see cheating in relationships is that the person who's cheating is just narcissistic. And they do what they want without regard for others' feelings. They are often playing a facade in the relationship. This is the type of person who might act like a great partner, but behind the scenes they're lying and cheating. I know there's been tons of people who think they're dating a great guy and then they find out he's just behind the scenes been acting really not great. These types of people are not happy with themselves or the current relationship, so they self-sabotage. These people will often betray their partner in some way, and then when it's found out, they try to talk themselves out of it. They make tons of excuses to try and save the connection, even though there's obviously a disconnect and they really don't value the connection or respect the other person, but they fight to keep it. In these types of situations, the narcissistic person is trying to regain control of the situation and the other person because now their control of them is threatened. They often manipulate the other person to forgive them and stay in the connection. They often don't even like the other person, but they like the control that they have over them or the benefit of the relationship in some way, whether that's financial or status or sexual, whatever benefit that they feel they're getting from the relationship. This is a lack of authenticity within themselves and the connection. They actually aren't sorry, but they will pretend that they are sorry and claim it won't happen again, but it often does because they do not care about the other person's feelings. Life seems to always have messy situations like this. This is a part of the human experience, and what we need to do is understand what's really happening, what lessons are trying to be taught to us in that moment. People sometimes get married to people that they don't actually like. I keep seeing this online that I feel like men are more guilty of this, that they will just get married to whoever they're dating, in their 20s or 30s, and think yeah, this is good, and they don't actually consider who is this person actually compatible. It's more about when they're ready to settle down, who's the person that's around them. Obviously, it's not gonna be all men, but I've seen a lot of different people share that perspective online. Yeah, so people tend to get married to people that they're not actually truly compatible with, or they are mirroring each other's shadow aspects instead of the light. This causes greater problems to emerge as time goes on. This is a part of life for a lot of people. People still act shocked when they find out like a respectable person in the community has engaged in infidelity or adulterous behavior and it gets out, especially if you're like in a small town and everyone knows everything. These people are supposed to have these like virtuous morals, but in fact they do have these same shadow aspects that everyone else has that are being triggered in that moment. Cheating, I'd say, is definitely a message about the current state of the connection. There is either a lack of alignment, lack of respect, needs are not being met in some way, or it's to self-sabotage the connection. If a relationship is out of alignment, one party may feel drawn to cheat subconsciously in order to cause problems in the relationship to begin a dismantling process. Or if there has been this deception going on for a while, it will begin to show. Problems like this are meant to push you to reflect on if the connection is in alignment. I think this can also become a problem when people stay in relationships past its expiration date, because it's easier than breaking up or getting a divorce, or they don't believe in divorce because of old religious customs. Some people stay with abusive partners or people they're not happy with because they feel the sanctity, and commitment of marriage is above their own well-being and happiness. I think it can be easy to fall into the mindset of blaming this third person for someone's infidelity and try to reduce the blame on the person that they're supposed to be committed with. People on Dateline are always like, "You're destroying my family." And, they want to believe that this outside force came in and seduced them and manipulated them. But it's up to the person in the relationship to set and maintain boundaries with other people when they're in a committed relationship, if that's what they want. This situation can come up to show that there were cracks in the foundation of the relationship, or it was not built on a strong foundation to begin with. If it were wonderful and solid, then the connection would not have been able to be infiltrated. They did you a favor by bringing this to the surface so it can be addressed. It brings the darkness to the surface. Some people aren't even aware of these lurking desires until confronted with a situation and opportunity like this. Oftentimes, this causes confusion in a relationship where the people involved thought it was solid and committed, only to find out that there's embedded an affair going on. Some people are very strong in their convictions and sense of self, and they know what they want in a partner, and they know that cheating is a deal breaker for them. However, there are some people who are not so sure, and perhaps they thought they held those beliefs and convictions, but then they're put in a situation like that and now they're unsure. Perhaps there are other factors, like if they're already married or have children or built a life together, then it's much more difficult and painful to now tear it all down. Infidelity can be worked through if both people want it to work. But if it's only one-sided, it's not going to work. If someone strays in the relationship and you forgive them, there is a chance that they will keep doing it, and they won't like you more because you forgave them. They actually have less respect for you because you've decided to stay with someone who has betrayed you. There is an element of self-worth at play here. You do not value yourself enough to leave when someone has disrespected you, and they will continue to exploit that. Often I see people will stay with someone who has cheated on them because I love them or they're my soulmate, and they cannot see their life without them. And in that moment, I ask, you have all this love for them. Where is the love for yourself? In that moment, you are loving them more than you love yourself. To recognize you deserve better than someone who carelessly disregards your feelings and connection. A relationship requires love and mutual respect for one another's feelings. Just having that love is not enough. I think a lot of people will have to deal with infidelity at some point, or other atrocities of betrayal, but it is in those moments that you are faced with a choice to leave or stay with the person. Whatever choice you make is more insight into where you are right now on your personal journey and how willing you are to self-sacrifice and whether or not you should self-sacrifice. There does beg the question, though, is why does one want to work out infidelity with someone? This person has disrespected the commitment, your trust, your feelings. What shadow aspect is that appealing to? Low self-worth, desperate for love, fear of being alone? In my opinion, a healed feminine or masculine energy will recognize that this relationship is not in alignment and will be grateful that they have been shown the truth of the connection. It's up to them to recognize that this is not what they desire in a connection, and it'd be best to let them go. They do not see your worth in the connection, and that's all right. Someone else will, or you would be better off alone. They are not up to your standards because you want someone who is faithful. But once again, it might not be easy to break off situations like that, especially if there's kids involved or you're legally binded. Sometimes someone doesn't have enough strength to be able to break off a connection like that. And that's okay. Sometimes it takes time to get the courage to walk away and choose yourself. And I think a lot of times in those situations, you do end up looking at yourself like, what am I lacking that this person went to seek elsewhere? And your self-worth can really be in the garbage in that moment. And it can cause you to stay with that person because your self-worth is so low. Sometimes people feel trapped in those situations due to financial reasons. But I think that there are often solutions you haven't thought of if you really wanted to leave. If you really value yourself, you'll find a way eventually, even if it is harder in some ways. You know, when you really value and respect yourself, you're going to do what you need to do to put yourself in a better place and away from people who do not respect or value you. It can appear to be easier to stay for financial reasons, but the mental and emotional side of it may end up taking a greater toll over time. There is another element of some people just don't care about cheating in relationships, and sometimes both people cheat on each other and they really are mirroring those shadows. This is the karmic element between them. They stay together because they're on the same level and they don't want to evolve. Lying, cheating, lack of intimacy, lack of authentic connection, and hiding in the shadows. Some people prefer chaos and deception, and they do not want to face how their shadows are controlling them. They don't want to be honest with the other person or themselves. Some people think, well, yeah, I was cheated on, but I'm going to stay with them and then I'm going to get even. And this is mirroring that emotional immaturity. This can also be tied with that feeling that you feel like you don't deserve better, so you're going to stay with someone who's toxic. Because if you felt like you deserved better, then you wouldn't be with them, you would leave. Staying with someone who disrespects you wears on your self-esteem more and more over time. It was more common back in the day for women to have to look the other way while their husband had mistresses because they didn't really have a choice. They could leave, but they would often not have anything, no money, no credit card, no job. That shadow still lingers in the collective where a lot of people in general are afraid to leave because of infidelity. Marriage for a long time and often still presently is something where you suppress your feelings and anger in order to preserve the marriage. You hide things, you don't share how you really feel, you grow resentment, you don't address issues. This is inauthenticity. These are the people that have been married for years and they don't actually like each other. And it seems normal to have something like this. You know, the whole, oh, they're an old married couple and it's just like they just don't like each other. And that's been so normalized, but I don't think it should be because I don't think it's healthy. A lot of people look down at people involved in affairs and third-party situations. They feel a sense of superiority of morals to think that they would never be involved in such a thing. And maybe they wouldn't, but no one's perfect. Morals are funny because to some, cheating on a partner is ultimate betrayal, but abusing them is fine. Abusing children is fine. People who are so high on their horses often have a very dark closet. People who disapprove and preach very loudly are often just as messy, perhaps in different ways, perhaps in the same ways. People who preach loudly are often projecting their own distaste for themselves onto other people. Situations like this are often faded as they're, negative patterns that you've probably dealt with in past lives, or even, patterns that have come up in your family. And your subconscious attracts the things that you need to learn. It draws you in. These situations draw you in, even if it seems very destructive. It's messy, and then it blows up in your face. And is heavily criticized by people who have been fortunate enough to not have to have been in that situation, or who have but pretend like they haven't. These situations can be hard to navigate and confusing. It's easy to pass judgment. It is hard to hold space for understanding the greater lessons at work. It's all right to hold compassion for people even if you wouldn't have ended up in the same situation, or think you wouldn't have. Part of an evolving society is having compassion for when people make mistakes and holding space for them to learn and do better. There are many perspectives to look at a situation, and I tend to focus on the darker parts that trigger people and make them angry, but it may benefit them to consider. Things that they don't want to agree with. People who get cheated on want to be told that they're the victim and that they're correct and that the other person is bad. And that is a valid perspective. But that doesn't mean that's where the analysis ends. Lilith energy is all about that. Stirring up the hidden feelings by speaking about the unpopular or rejected general consensus in society. And I love that. So that's all I have today. Thanks for watching. Stay frosty. Bye.